Alrighty, so it's time to do the MLS Eastern Conference prediction video. I am doing this video a day earlier because tomorrow I am, of course, doing the news of the week, and I don't really want to do a double upload on a school day, so that's why I decided to do it today. And just as you know, I'm actually doing this video when the TFC versus Independiente game is still going on, and that game is currently at 1-1. I believe it's right about the 78th minute now, which sounds like a competitive game until you realize the aggregate score is 5-1. So yeah, that game is pretty much over, although not that it actually was going to be competitive in terms of the aggregate score at the beginning. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of people knew that this game was already over after what happened in the first leg. But I'll get to that when we get to the review on Thursday. But now we're going to get into the Eastern Conference prediction. And as I said many times before, and I said this last year, this is just my opinion. And if you see your team here on the right side, so this year I did something a little bit different. I put the playoff team on the left side and the team that is not going to make the playoff on the right side, which is why all these numbers are red. If your team belong in the right side, then yeah, try not to be super mad the fact that I did not predict your team to make it to the playoffs this season. I mean, it's no really offense to your team. It's not that I hate your team or anything. It's just that I don't think this team is going to make it because there are some logical reasons that I'm going to pretty much explain to you guys why these teams are not making to the playoffs. And as usual, if you disagree with my opinion, let me know in the comments below. But this is just my opinion. This is probably not going to be correct. And if you saw my prediction that I did with the MLS bracket and also in the NFL bracket, I think you can say that I am not a good predictor guy. Although last year I did get most of them right in terms of the standings. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit good news and bad news in terms of should you trust my prediction. But either way, enough talking. Let's actually begin, and we're going to start with the team that I think is going to finish bottom in the Eastern Conference. And speaking of Toronto FC, that's where they're going to be this year. So Toronto, they are going to finish dead last. And, you know, obviously there's been a lot of rumor that Pozzolo is going to come to TFC, and I think eventually he would. But the question is, when exactly is he going to come to this team? And I think even if he comes to this team, does this team have enough to not really just get absolutely embarrassed heading into this new season? I mean, the defense of this team is just an absolute mess, and that is despite the fact that they brought in Lawrence Simon and hoped that that would be an ideal way to shore up that defense. And they also lost two of their best player and two just kind of core players from them for these last couple of years in terms of making it to the MLS Cup and making it into the playoffs with Javinko and Victor Vasquez. Now, as I said with Pozzolo, he's going to be the Victor Vasquez replacement, but who exactly is going to be the guy? Like, I think Josie Altidore is going to still score goals for them. The question is, can he stay healthy? Because last year, he just could not stay healthy for a majority of the year. And last time I checked, he's still not back from an injury that he's dealing with in the off season. So yeah, for TFC, this could really be a rough year. And this is not because of anything happened in that first leg between them and Independiente where they just completely shit the bed. But I just see that when you look at just the overall picture with this team and just how hectic this off season was, I feel like this is not going to be a good year for TFC, and this is just going to be a rebuilding year for them. And in 11th place, another team that is kind of in a bit of a hectic situation is Orlando City, who, you know, I mentioned it before how they need a culture change in this team. Now, they did get Nani, which is kind of like a Kaká type signing, but I don't know if Nani is just going to single-handedly carry this team to the playoffs. I mean, there is just still so many problems and so many questions with this team, and they didn't really kind of like they didn't really address some of those issues. The defense is still. They got rid of the defense, but they just kind of replaced them with some young guys that is kind of unproven. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of question with this team, and I just think when you look at this team is definitely not up there as a team that could potentially compete. And I think the only way they can compete is if Nani just completely carry this team and do even what Kaká couldn't do with this team, which is just carry this team on his back to make it to the playoffs. And the guys that they signed, like Coman and Sasha Kleshtin, those guys can finally get going. And even Oro Russell, one of the guy that they signed part of that offseason where they just signed so many of these good veteran players. And we thought that with them signing all these good veteran players, they would actually make a run to the playoffs. Yeah, that was not the case. And in 10th place, it's actually going to be the new boys, FC Cincinnati. And, for Cincinnati, I put them here because when I look at this team, it kind of in some way remind me of Minnesota United when they came into the league. And I know Cincinnati fans and certainly their front office is keep trying to tell people that we are not going to be like Minnesota. We're going to try to stack our defense and be a counter attacking team. And, from what I saw from them throughout this preseason, yeah, it has not looked good for them. And I know I said before that preseason usually doesn't matter, and usually teams that do bad in the preseason doesn't mean that they do bad in the regular season. But what I'm concerned about this team is goal scoring first and foremost. I guess Audi is probably going to be the guy that is going to score a ton of goals for them, but you don't know if he can do that. You don't know if Audi is going to be like that guy before he suffered that devastating injury that basically kind of, after he suffered that injury, he just fell off the cliff. Is he going to be that kind of guy, or is he going to be the guy that just suffered that injury and fell off the cliff? And other than that, who else do they really have? Roland Lamar, who really fell off the cliff in the second half of the season with FC Dallas. Ledesma, a USL kind of player. Darren Maddox. Maddox is good. It's a decent kind of piece for them. He was good for DC United last season, but I kind of feel like Maddox is it's kind of the guy that you usually could rely on if he's coming off the bench. He's not really he can definitely score tons of goals, but he's not really at a level where if he's a starter, he is going to be kind of like an above average kind of striker. He's kind of like an average striker that is above average if he's going to come off the bench. And I have a feeling that's what FC Cincinnati is going to do, is that when Audi is not looking well, then they're going to put Maddox in late in the game. But again, I don't know where the goal scoring is going to come with this team. And since this team is going to be setting up to be a very defensive team, hopefully they don't concede a lot of goals. They definitely have good defenders in this team, but if they're going to start conceding a lot of goals, and look what Minnesota did a couple of years ago when they tried to be compact and it ultimately failed, then yeah, FC Cincinnati could easily end up to be Minnesota. This team just doesn't scream to me saying that they're going with the LAFC and Atlanta United approach in the expansion year, which is just go big. This team looks like it's just going small for a bit and see what's going to happen in the future. And then in 9th place, it's going to be the Revs. So, New England, obviously, this year, they bought in probably their biggest acquisition throughout their entire existence in their existing franchise off season by bringing Carlos Gil. But the question is he going to actually do well in MLS? Because Gil hasn't really done very well with the team who I think it was Deportivo that he was with before he come to New England. I might be wrong, to be honest, but he hasn't really been in very good form lately, and New England really splashed the cash to get him, and if he does not pay off, then Yeah, there's definitely question about this team. But overall, I think the main question with this team is, can those players that were clearly overachieving, guys like Theo Bunbury, Pineda, Diego Fagundes, can those guys once again deliver in this season? Because those guys did deliver in the first half of the season, but they really came back to down to earth in the second half of the season, and ultimately that was what New England was. New England was very good in the first half of the season. I even said that potentially they're going to make the playoffs, and then they just fell off the cliff after their players started to stop playing out of their mind and just feels like a world beater or whatsoever. So I think New England is probably going to be finishing ninth and probably going to be right at the same spot as they were last year, where they are just going to be so close from making the playoffs. This team has been so close from making the playoffs for the last couple of years. I mean, I know prior to last year they had back-to-back season where they finished just below the red line. So this Revs team is definitely not considered the worst team in the league, but certainly this team is not considered the best and not considered a playoff team. And if you're a Revs fan, that has to be absolutely infuriating, because nothing is more infuriating than seeing your team just getting stuck in mediocrity for so long. And I feel like New England right now, even with Brad Friedel trying to get his system toward his team and trying to maybe use his system to get this team over the hump, I think New England's probably going to stuck in mediocrity for a while, unless they started to really make some more big signings in the future. And then in 8th place, the team that's just going to miss out on the playoffs is going to be the Chicago Fire. Now, I have no doubt the Fire is going to be better this year. Actually, you know what? I might as well just write Revolution here. I'm going to put the full name there. But yeah, I think the Fire is going to be better this year. Their attack definitely looks really decent. Now that they have got CJ Sapon, more kind of added attacking depth that they need, and their midfield definitely looks really decent too. But the biggest question with this team, as I mentioned throughout this offseason, is the defense. This back line is just really thin and also just does not have any depth whatsoever. And I don't know, for this Fire team, I think they really might have to try to do what the Galaxy did last year, where they're just going to try to outscore everybody, because that back line, I have a feeling that back line is going to concede a whole ton of goals. So what that means is that the Fire could have to maybe heavily rely on Nikolic again, although, I don't think they need to just rely on Nikolic. I think Katai is another goal-scoring option. And then in the midfield, obviously, they still have Schweinsteiger, who I think this is probably his last year, and they're hoping that he can still have one more year left in the tank to really kind of push that midfield. And they also have Mihailovic, which is a very young, talented attacking midfielder, and really one of the only young, talented player that they actually kept. They lost a lot of players in their prospect pool throughout these last couple of years, and Mihailovic is really the only one that is left. And obviously you got Dax McCarty there in the midfield. McCarty, he's also getting old. Does he still have any more left in the tank to really kind of make this team very good? But I think for the Fire, besides the backline issue, I think the other issue that they have coming into this year is going to be injuries. If this team is going to be plagued with injury like they did last year, this team is going to be right where they were last season. Because last season, one of the biggest reasons why they were one of the worst team in the league is because so many players literally were stuck in the IR, and they just do not have any replacement. This team does not have any depth whatsoever. It's one of the thinnest team in the league. But now, moving up into the left side, which is the teams that I think is going to make the playoffs. And in 7th place, just making the playoffs, is going to be Montreal. This is the final year for Piatti. Well, I'm assuming it's probably the final year. I mean, he did say that this is going to be... He's not going to renew his contract, and he's probably going to leave after this. So for Montreal, they really need to give him a one last hurrah. And I really think, when you look at this Impact team, they definitely have decent pieces on the defense and the midfield. They also added Maxi Urruti, who hopefully he can take the pressure off of Piatti in terms of the goal scoring department, and also solve their issue with the number 9, because this Montreal team last season, one of their biggest issue is that they don't really have number 9, and that they was just so desperate that they even decided to buy Quincy Amarikwa, which I'm not gonna lie, I was very kind of jealous and just kind of agonized that Amarikwa actually scored a goal with Montreal. Like, he hasn't scored a goal for a very long time, and then once we decided to trade him to there, he scored a goal. Yeah, wow, thanks Amarikwa, thanks Quincy. You could have at least give us one more goal before you actually depart to somewhere else. By the way, Amarikwa is no longer with Montreal, he's actually with DC right now. So yeah, I think Montreal, they're going to be just fine. But again, the attack might still be a little bit of an issue. If they're gonna just heavily rely on Piatti, and if Piatti is not having his day, then this Montreal team is not going to have its day. And that's what makes me worry about this team heading into the future, because if you don't have Piatti in the future, what are you gonna do? Like, he's your face of your franchise. And unlike the other situation where, well, in some way it's kind of similar to what Montreal could be facing with, could potentially be having a situation where TFC is facing, where once they got rid of their biggest star and they don't really think about replacement, yeah, they're gonna stuck in the bottom of the table. And hopefully Montreal is not gonna be like that. But in 6th place, it's going to be Columbus. And I think I was kind of skeptical of putting them in the playoffs, because they got a new manager in Caleb Porter, and the fact that Greg Berhalter is no longer there, and he's really the biggest reason why this team was good for the last couple of years. I mean, this team, when you look at the squad, it's not really a squad that's going to dazzle you and say that, wow, I really like this squad, and I think this is a very talented squad. This squad is more known as a very hard-working kind of squad, which kind of symbolized what the Save the Crew movement was. It was a very hard-working campaign to keep the Crew in Columbus, which I am very happy that they are staying for the future. But, let's see if Caleb Porter can implement that kind of mentality in this team. And also, they already had a huge blow in this preseason after losing Milton Valenzuela. And Valenzuela, of course, is probably the best right back in the league. And they did replace him with Waylon Francis, who is decent, but he's not Milton Valenzuela. So that's going to be something that they're going to have to deal with. And the other thing that they're going to have to deal with is goal scoring, because last year they were the lowest goal scoring team heading into the playoffs. They really rely a lot on their defense, which their defense was absolutely stellar, but the attack was really lacking. And we'll see if Jarzy Zardes is going to have another career year, because last year he had a career year, and if he cannot replicate it into this year, I am a little concerned about the Crew going forward. I mean, besides him, maybe Higuain could be a guy that score goals. And I think maybe because the reason why Zardes scored tons of goals is because Higuain just keep playing the balls to him, and he just scored tons of goals by that. Maybe Pedro Santos could actually have a resurgent kind of year. I mean, last year, I don't know what happened to Pedro Santos. He was just, he was awful last year. He was a guy that looks nothing like the guy that we saw in 2017. So, yeah, that's something that Columbus will have to think about heading into the near future. In 5th place, it's NYCFC. And, NYCFC, no doubt, is going to take a huge step back, because this is the post-Villa era. And also they lost Yangel Herrera, who is arguably one of their best player, and probably their best player besides David Villa. But I still think this team should still have enough to make the playoffs. Obviously, they already found a Villa replacement in Alexandra Matrida. And, Matrida, he's got to deliver heading into this season, and I'm gonna assume that he's gonna deliver, even though I didn't really like this deal, and I didn't like how they decided to just absolutely spend a fortune on a guy that was playing in the Romanian league. And then I also heard some people in the comments was slating me, saying that I was disrespecting the Romanian league, which yes, but at the same time, have anyone really look at the Romanian league and just actually think that that's a league is going to be one of the best league in Europe? At best, it's probably a top 20 league in terms of European league there. So I don't know. I don't know if he can really cut out into MLS, but with the way that NYCFC really just they've gone all out in terms of thinking he is the right replacement for Villa, I'm assuming he's going to do very well. But the other big question for NYCFC is really on the manager, Dome Turin. This is, I really think that he is the guy that has the hottest seat. I mean, I know some people say, well, what about Greg Vanny? Greg Vanny is on a hot seat with what's going on with TFC, and I think most likely Vanny could be gone with the way that TFC is going through this rebuilding era, and that Alec Curtis don't see him as the future. But what about Dome Turin? He is a guy that I think he could be really in the hot seat if he does not get this team going. And if he managed like what he did last year with NYCFC, this team not only is not going to make the playoffs, but he's going to get fired very soon, because there's just way too much talent on this team, even without Villa and Young Herrera, that this team does not make the playoffs. It's just ridiculous, the fact that if he does not do a good job again, that I think NYCFC has no choice but to really fire him. And this NYCFC and the City Football Group, they're committed to winning, and that if they see the team is not doing well, even with so much talent on their team, they're not going to hesitate to really fire the coach and bringing another one to hope that they can get back to where they've been for the last couple of years. And in fourth place, I'm going to say it's the Union. Now, this is a bit of a risk, because for me, what I'm seeing and why I'm putting the Union in fourth is that I'm assuming this new pressing system that they're going to do is going to work out. I'm going to assume that Marco Fabian is going to absolutely turn it on and become one of the best players in the league. And yeah, that's why they're going to finish fourth. Because when you look at this team, there is definitely a lot of talent on this team. And if they can master this pressing system that they are switching toward to heading into this season, then no doubt that they are going to be one of the best team, and even maybe compete for top 2 in the Eastern Conference. Now, if that does not work, if the pressing system turns out to be a disaster, then they could easily end up missing the playoffs. And you know who is going to get his job terminated if that's going to happen? Oh yeah, that's right. It's the good old Jim Curtin, a guy that Union fans absolutely hate and want him to be gone for so long ago. Yeah, he is going to get fired. And maybe you could say that he could potentially be the first guy to get fired if this system does not work, and that if the Union just goes get off to an absolute disastrous start, I won't be surprised that Ernest Tanner, the GM of the Union, would actually fire Jim Curtin in this situation. But now moving on into third, I'm going to say DC United. And, both of these prediction that I made with the Union and DC being 3rd and 4 are pretty high risk prediction, and I don't know if it's going to pay off at the end of the season, but that's why I'm making prediction, and that's why I've been saying that some of my predictions are usually not correct. But having said that, no worry, Union fans and DC fans, there are something that I could say that is probably the reason why they can finish in the top 5 of the Eastern Conference. As I said, with the Union, if their press system works, then I think they can be one of the best team. And for DC United, if Wayne Rooney can do what he did last year, and if Lucho Acosta, despite all this kind of transfer saga that he had with PSG, if he can clear that off of his mind, I think this team can definitely be one of the best teams in the league. And also, if they can actually win on the road. The road was a big problem for DC United. At home, they were probably the best team in the league. But when they go on the road, that's when there are a lot of question mark. And, with Wayne Rooney, his first full season in MLS, you don't know exactly how he will fare when he has to go on the road. Because remember, when Rooney came to this team, he didn't have to go on the road very long. He came to this team when Audi Field just opened, and DC had a ton of home games. And yeah, we'll see if he, of course, would be affected by this. But having said that, I also think that this DC team has definitely looked a lot better than it was last season. I mean, I always talk about Lucho Acosta and Wayne Rooney being the dynamic duo for this team, but let's not forget about the supporting cast of this team. I mean, guys like Orel Fisher, Russell Canals, all those guys that are just kind of supporting cast, and even Bill Hamid, who is just, I think he could definitely be in contention of the goalkeeper of the year, especially what he did when he came back to DC last year. Yeah, I think this team can definitely, with all those pieces aligned, I think this team can definitely be one of the best team in the league and one of the best team in the Eastern Conference. But now let's talk about second place, and I'm gonna say the Red Bulls is gonna get second place. And for the Red Bulls, obviously they lost Tyler Adams, which was a pretty big piece to lose for them because he was a very important player for them. He was arguably one of the best player in the league and certainly one of the star player for that team. But now he's with RB Leipzig. But the good news for the Red Bulls is that they still have so much talent in their team that I think this team is going to really not only just challenge for the MLS Cup, but they're going to try to win the Supporters Shield again. Although I'm pretty sure if you talk to any Red Bulls fan, they can care less about the Supporters Shield. Like, they won it so many times in these last couple of years that what matters now is the Cup. And really, the only team that is going to be standing in its way is going to be Atlanta, who I think they're going to finish top this year. And I know what happened in that CCL game between them and Heredino, where, yeah, they did not look good whatsoever. But it kind of reminds me of what happened last season when they didn't look good in their first game of the season against Houston, got absolutely blown out in that game, and then the next thing you know, they clicked again. And speaking of that Heredino game, I'm about 60% sure that Atlanta is going to come back in that. I think they're going to, I know that game is not going to be taking place at Mercedes-Benz. They're actually going to play in another venue around the Atlanta area. But I think they should still have enough to basically overcome that 3-1 deficit. And, all they need is to just score 2 goals and not concede any. And this Atlanta team, knowing what they did last season at home and how many goals that they score and that they've been just scoring goals for fun, this team definitely can do that in that second leg. But, overall this season, even without Miguel Almiron, which is a huge loss, and in some way this is kind of similar with the Red Bulls, with them losing Tyler Adams, a big loss for them, they still have a lot of decent pieces. And they also had pretty much replaced kind of their Miguel Almiron player that they lost with Pity Martinez coming in. And yeah, I think this team is definitely going to be in contention of winning MLS Cup again and make it back-to-back MLS Cup. Although, to be fair, it's been a long time since we had a team win back-to-back MLS Cup, and it's been a long time since we had a defending champion win the Cup again for the second year in a running. But this Atlanta team is definitely set up to potentially achieve that. But yeah, that of course is pretty much my MLS Eastern Conference prediction. Let me know in the comments below What do you think about these prediction? And let me know in the comments of your own prediction of the Eastern Conference, who is going to be where in the standings by the end of this regular season. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. On Thursday, I will do the Western Conference version. And yeah, I will see you guys next time.